My name is Amalia Mesa-Bains. I'm Professor Emerita from California State University at Monterey Bay, where I was the founder and director of the Visual and Public Art Institute. Simultaneously, for over 40 years, I have been a practicing artist, and I would say that the two aspects of my life that have connected most of my work and have been driving forces have been art and education. What I'm really interested in is how the development of art in young people can be shaped to help them build relationships in community. In my own work as an artist, I've operated from what I consider the vernacular. I'm the third, possibly the fourth generation in my Mexican-descended family to be an artist. In many ways, I have used art as a tool for other aspects of society that I think are either unjust or to some degree require change. I think of art as a tool, as a way of life, and in my own work as a kind of spiritual practice. I'm probably best known for having done altars, beginning in the traditions of the home altar, the Day of the Dead, the yard shrine, which are sometimes called capillas or little chapels, and the descanso or roadside shrine. I began working in the early 70s and affiliated in San Francisco with the Galeria de la Raza and the Mexican Museum. And after almost 45 years of making art, I still hold to the idea that the sacred is a space by which we can understand the world around us. And particularly coming to Monterey after 30 years in San Francisco, I began to sort of excavate the landscape here. We were beginning a new university at Fort Ord, and CSUMB was giving us an opportunity to look at what that space had been. And from that perspective, my work started to change and moved into areas that are concerned with history and social meaning. To some degree, I guess human geography and the ideas behind it drive me now. As a Latina, as a Chicana, as a Mexican-descended person, I have found it very compelling to be in an area that has such deep roots for Latino people. And I've wondered very, very much why there is such a gap between the history of this region and the new immigrants that continually flow in as workers and community members. So in the years at CSUMB, one of the things that my colleagues and I were most interested in doing was linking the university to the larger community, and for me, more specifically, the Latino community. And those have been the projects that I think, as an artist and as an educator, have had the most impact on me, changed me, and at the same time, in a reciprocal sense, I hope have changed some of our community partners in the region. One of the things that has interested me since I arrived in this area in 1995, I came with my husband, Richard Baines, who was at the time selected to be the head of the music program at CSUMB. My colleague, Judy Baca, was to run the Visual and Public Art program, and she decided not to come, and I took the position. In the years since 1997, I've spent a lot of time trying to learn about where I am. First Fort Ord, and then later the Monterey Peninsula, then later Salinas Valley, and expanded outwards. And one of the things that I find is so rich and so useful as a teacher is that this is a multicultural, multilingual space, historically and even in a contemporary sense. We've studied the Californial period, and for those who don't know, the settling of California was done by 22 people, the majority of whom were not European. They weren't even Spanish. They were mixed race people, mulattoes, African descent, Native Americans, and Mexican people. So this whole region is really an exercise in diversity. Yet, for some reason, I feel that we don't acknowledge that in a manifest way. So when I started working with Monterey History and Art, and we worked with the Monterey Museum of Art and a number of other organizations, it seemed to me that one of the deficits was the lack of connection to the existing Latino community, and that there was a possibility in this area because of the collections of the institutions, the history that they held, the richness of the adobes, a way to make a bridge between these continually immigrating communities from Mexican-descended areas who, in fact, unbeknownst to them often, shared a cultural history with the founders of this region. So sometimes I wonder how that can be made more visible. One of the things that I've been doing in the last number of years is developing visual arts projects in which we use a kind of excavation, the use of a laboratory as an art form, a way to look into that history and to make those connections. Because I really believe that if our young people coming into the school system can go beyond the usual traditional study of the missions and actually begin to understand what those missions did, what their function was, what it means to be mixed race, the history of American Indians in the region, the cultural contributions in the California period and the Mexican period, then maybe we could fill out a story that right now rests simply within a Spanish, I would say, fantasy culture. Some of it is not accurate, and the Anglo entrance. And so, for example, I now live in San Juan Bautista, and I live on Fremont's Peak. And I'm constantly irritated because it really should be called Gavilan, because Gavilan was the name, the Spanish name that was taken for the Indians that were there. And Fremont was a soldier who took it upon himself to attempt an early territorialization of the Mexican place there prior to the Mexican-American War and prior to the annexation. And I think that we forget sometimes that the annexation which followed the war was settled by a treaty, the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. And that treaty in Article 10 privileged the rights of the mixed people, the Indians and the Spanish, who occupied that space before the Anglo intervention. They were privileged to have the right of their language, the right of their land, and the right of free passage across the border. Once the treaty was signed, the Article 10 was removed, and we began what I sometimes refer to as the upside downness of California. Because in many respects, the people who once owned the land became the workers on the land, and we are, more than 150 years later, dealing with a kind of split between the history of the territory, the history of this region, and the real life of the people who come here from Mexico, and we don't have a way to make that connection. In my own work, I've been working on a piece since 1998, which is called Private Landscapes and Public Territories. And I traced my family's migration from Mexico into the US from 1848 to 1998 because I wanted to know, in terms of my own upbringing, what were the places that people inhabited. And I was able to find it through birth records and some historical figures in my family. And I've been developing these landscape and garden pieces. Now that's my own work. But what I'm saying is that I think that we have the capacity here through our cultural institutions, through our universities and our schools, to make a richer story of the real history of the Monterey Peninsula and the Salinas Valley. We can give people a sense of belonging that they do not now have. And that belonging strengthens us. Everything we know about demographics tells us that Latinos, one of every 2 babies born in California is born to a Latino woman, that the children of these families, whether we call them documented, undocumented, whatever our notions of citizenship, they will build the new California. And if they don't feel as though they belong, if they don't have a sense of connectedness to that rich history, how can they have a rich future? So to me, our educational systems have to acknowledge that, and it's through art and culture and all of its complexity and all of its beauty that we're capable of doing that.